So if I take you back to 2019 when the club was relegated, budget of around 4.2 million, huge names, big wages, relegated in last place. Disastrous season. In my view, the most unnecessary relegation in English football history, without doubt. How on earth could you be relegated with a budget like that? It's a crime, frankly. And it set us back years. And I always wanted to run a club by 30, that was my ambition, but I didn't think it was possible. When I was appointed, it wasn't unilaterally popular, to say the least. Out of my depth, too young, cheap. Words that you remember because people said them. I would say I didn't know how to deal with it, if I'm being brutally honest, because we're talking about a football club that's not awash with silverware. We don't own a trophy cabinet. Rightfully so, we don't have many trophies to put in it. And that was our first automatic promotion since I was a boy, since the Premier League. And you could see that. We're a big club, but we haven't had enough big success. There was a desperation to get out of the division, so it had to happen this season. The door's just been unlocked for us, and a door that we needed to open for a while.
Hello, Business of Sport pals. I know you just want to get on with the show, but there is an exciting announcement to make, and that is that we have just launched our Patreon. This is the chance to get you more involved in the show, in helping us choose our guests, ask some of the questions, get involved in the quickfire round. We want to give you the chance to win some really cool stash, go to some great events. Everything that you think you can't get access to right now, you're going to have in the Patreon, on top of some bonus content from me in an extra time format, revealing what it's really like when we go behind the camera with our guests. So make sure you drop in and see what the Patreon is all about. Now, that is enough from me. Time to get on with the show. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Business of Sport.
Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you in, and the perfect time to do it because it was such an incredible final day of the season for you a few weeks ago. But tell me, 90th minute, you're in the position that you're in, automatic promotion, on the line, and needing to score a goal.
Rising underneath it, Latchley will hit it, deflected, it's in! That's the moment! That's the moment! In the dying seconds, Bradford City have found the goal that sends them automatically into League One.
And then what happened? What was going on?
I can't really remember it, if I'm honest, that exact moment, because it was just ecstasy, really. You can't. In your mind, when you do this job, I would lie if I said that at times when it's been close or tough, you start to dream about what it might be. It keeps the engine running in the tough times. But then when you put the dream on the table, you wouldn't have dreamt it out like that because it would have been a little bit too far-fetched, probably. We needed to outscore Walsall basically on the day. And we went into the game against Fleetwood. We knew they would come and try and do the right thing for the league, which they did. They were really dignified in the way they played the game. They played it properly. They tried to stop us. And we had not many chances, if I'm honest, clear-cut in the first half. Then the tension builds. Walsall score, of course, at Crewe. And you start playing it out in your mind that it's possibly going to end in the playoffs and it's going to be tougher than you wanted it to be, and or this moment isn't meant to be. There's going to be another one, And then our manager threw our centre back up front. He hit the post. Seconds later, the ball came back into the box and he essentially squared it to the keeper, played straight into the keeper. Not his foot. I think it was blocked. It might have even been blocked, actually. I can't remember. Moments later, Anthony Sarcevic, who's a promotion winner by trade, blazes one over the crossbar from bang in front. And that was the moment where, I have to be honest, with 1 minute 20 on the clock, you think, okay, that might be it. And then, of course, 95 plus something, we lobbed the ball into the box, and it was just magical from that moment. And I can still see the ball rolling over the line. It was that moment I can remember. When it rolls over the line, the whole world just slows down in your mind at that point. It's like you can see the revolution of the ball inch by inch. And when it rolled up this side of the net, the first thing I did was look to the lino to make sure. I don't know, what's an instinct, I guess. And then it's in the net and it's all over. There's seconds left, but the game then went on for another 15 minutes due to pitch invasions, and that was just torture. But yeah, it was
Incredible.
ridiculous.
There's two different sides, right, to football clubs. You have the performance side, and then you have the business side. And the performance side, in those moments, you're engaged in a slightly different way. When you're sitting in that box, those moments must be really hard. You can't affect it at all. You're watching as a spectator, but the impact, as we all know, on what this does for the club, the difference from being in League One to League Two is huge.
It's huge for us. I talk to our manager quite a lot about it. We talk about handing the baby over on a Saturday morning. There's no more anyone in the business or anyone off the pitch can do, so to speak. It's down to the players and the manager on the day, and then from the manager it's down to the players. And they had to go through a lot. We're talking about a football club that's not awash with silverware. We don't own a trophy cabinet. We don't have one. And that's the truth. And it's an observation I made when I joined the club and when I took over as chief executive. Rightfully so, we don't have many trophies to put in it, to be honest. And that was our first automatic promotion since I was a boy, since the Premier League. And I was told later, a member of our staff said to me he's waited all his life for it. And I said, what do you mean by that? And I didn't check the stats, not something I was looking at. But he said, well, actually, it's 1929, I believe, since we last clinched a promotion on the last day of the season at home. So not many people were around, and I was like, oh, wow. And you could see that, the outpouring of that was massive. We're a big club, but we haven't had enough big success. So we were just desperate. There was a desperation to get out of the division. We'd been pushing for a number of years, got close. In 2023, probably should have done it. We came up short of the playoffs last season, and then so it had to happen this season, really. We just felt like it was so needed for the business to grow as well. It's just like hit the lid, if you like, of what we can do revenue-wise in League Two. We've stretched it, and I knew that we had to go one more tier to go further. But of course, you in those moments, you're thinking about all of that, because you're thinking about, oh my, you've just unlocked, the door's just been unlocked for us. And a door that we needed to open for a while.
There are people that may not know. Those big football fans will be aware, certainly those ones that can remember football maybe 25 years ago when Bradford had the heights of Premier League football. But we're talking about a club with a massive history and a really turbulent recent past, from big major highs to significant lows. Mm-hmm. Can you give a little bit of a flavour for those that may not know just what this actually does for the club? How this has... how this moment has been created and why it's been so important now, based on what it's gone through, should we say over the last 30 or so years?
Probably 40 is where you'd have to start that clock. I think the thing that made it extra meaningful and it felt very emotional for a lot of people, me including, I wasn't alive then, was the fire. The Valley Parade fire disaster in 1985 was 40 years, virtually within days to the weekend, of us getting the automatic promotion. And that was the last time Bradford City won a league title. So internally, I can't lie to you, in the last 6 to 8 weeks of the season, we were targeting to win the league. We wanted to win it badly, and we knew that would be a wonderful, the only tribute we could possibly pay on the 40th anniversary. What more could you do as a football club on the pitch? But it felt all the same special because of how it ended, and there was a mixture of emotions. There was so much on that day because of the anniversary. And our last automatic promotion from what is now League Two was 1982. So it's 40 plus years. So it's a long, long time. And then obviously you move into the Premier League years, the glory, followed by financial collapse of the club, of the football club.
So it was in for 2 years, wasn't it, in the Premier League for 2 years in late 90s, early 2000s?
And the first year was okay, and the second year, I believe they went they went for it, and it had huge ramifications. Collapse of ITV Digital around that time didn't help, but they were well in above what they could afford, and then obviously Phil Parkinson had an era at the club as manager, and it went very well in the end, and they went to Wembley twice in one season, almost won the League Cup, get to the League Cup final as a League Two club. I don't think that's ever been done. It'll be done again.
That was the Swansea one.
Yeah. And of course they got promoted at Wembley through the playoffs. So there's been these periods of success, but then they've not necessarily followed with sustained. And that's the challenge now. That's our challenge my challenge is to make sure that we continue to progress. I believe we have progressed, year on year, on and off the pitch. But in the eyes of the majority of people, and I'm one of them, on-field results do also. I believe that the score takes care of itself. What we do off the pitch eventually translates on it. We believe that everybody's going to play a part. And for our staff to see that come to fruition, when I say our staff, our administrative staff, if you like, they now believe that they now completely understand what was suggested to them a few years ago, that they're gonna put the ball in the net, because it felt like we all put the ball in the net on the day. So yeah, it's historically the club has had incredible highs and then some horrific lows, which have, in my opinion, like no other club.
We're talking about a hugely supported, a massive club, right? And this is one of the beauties of English football that we will talk about relentlessly, is you have a pyramid, and this is a team in the 4th tier of English football, yet it's a 25,000-seater stadium. You had a record attendance, I think, for League Two on the final day of that season against Fleetwood of 24,000.
Well, it's actually the record attendance, full stop, in a league match. So in the modern era, I think our highest crowds, even in the Premier League, were 1920 because the stadium was still being developed. So we've done this season, including the Fleetwood game, we've done 3 league record crowds in the 4th division. So when I talk, sometimes I'm asked, why do I talk about our club as a developing club with potential? That's because that's what it is. But the fact that we've got potential, genuine potential, and we are developing is very exciting.
How do the fans take to that? Because you'll have some that historically will see themselves, because of the reputation of the club, as we're already there, and then you'll have others that recognise that. Do you have to balance communications to appease, or are you really trying to create this narrative of no, this is our reality today, and it's not a bad thing to be that?
I think you have to balance it. I think you have to be fair and honest. I've been asked that question before by supporters. I remember a supporter saying to me last year, "Are we going to win the league next season?" And I said, I'd love to win the league next. This is obviously going into this season. I said, well, I'd love that. What are you basing that almost claim to? Well, we should win the league. And I said, well, we haven't won a league since 1985, and that's not a reflection of my ambition at all. I wanted to change the dial from the second I took over, but it takes quite a while. It's not taken us 6 months to get promoted. It's taken us quite a few years, to be honest with you. And I think, but you have to set the expectations. But I think supporters are realistic. In what I call the new era of English football, League One is not the League One we left behind in 2019. It's a different animal. The spending is completely different. Our budget next season to the one we got relegated on, which was a top 6, top 7 budget, is completely different. It's frightening, and I think supporters are realistic about, we have to go back to League One and find our place, but we'll be going back to League One to compete. We want to compete. We're not going in there to make up the numbers. We're not going to accept that. We've never accepted. We could never accept that. That's just not us.
What changes? So you get promoted.
Yeah.
Everyone obviously knows there's a financial improvement, but how much can you actually do to affect that kind of change when you move into a division in the short term?
I think it can never be in the short term. The short term element of it is the recruitment of the first team players, in my opinion. The other term has been ongoing for a while. So when I took over at Bradford, we were looking at a £5 to £6 million business that was able to wash its face, but no longer able to compete, if we're being serious. And was COVID helped because of the amount of solidarity money we were paid by the Premier League based on the size of the club. So centrally, we received more money in COVID than we've ever received, probably since the Premier League days.
And sorry, just to explain that's because of
the
size
grants,
of the club being
the grants, the Premier League grants. They did it based on the attendance that you've lost. So it was massive for us, and obviously we didn't have the costs because there were none. There was no one there. So there were certainly very limited costs. So we're now running a pretty stable £8.7 to £9 million business in League Two, which we're pretty proud of. That's an improvement of around 40% in revenue and operational turnover, not transfer fees that have. And
not the football lottery, as we call it, which is stuff you can't predict at the start of the season.
We knew that. So the view being, League Two was tougher for Bradford than League One in some regards, because we're having to sell the dream at that point. You asked me about how you position it with supporters, but you're having to convince the supporters to come back to watch what they believe we shouldn't be in that division. And I share that belief. But you don't get to be in League One by believing you shouldn't be in League Two. That's what happened when we got relegated before my time. And I think we knew we had to arrive in League One with what I call a good start, a base plate of revenue. So before we sign a player, where are we? And we're comfortably in the black by some considerable margin.
Really?
Before we sign a player.
Yeah.
But the point being is, could Bradford City... So if I take you back to 2019 when the club was relegated, budget of around 4.2 million, which then was definitely playoff material back then. Huge names, big wages, relatively speaking, not now. Relegated in last place. Disastrous season.
From League One, this is?
From League One.
Yeah.
I would say, and I wouldn't want to mention other clubs, so I'll just stick to mine. In my view, the most unnecessary relegation in English football history, without a doubt. How on earth could you be relegated with a budget like that? It's a crime, frankly. And it set us back years. You know, you're carrying players, you're carrying... All the culture is carried then into the next few seasons. And it's really tough for the managers that came in. And when you reflect on that, it was going to be even harder for them. You don't realise how hard. So you wind the clock forward, and our start position is that number-ish, just under that number. Now, there are clubs in that division whose start position is minus. So when their owners are, I think the word investing is a brave word. I wouldn't use that word. When their owners are help assisting to try and win, if you like, I want to present a business to my owner that he can see is worth putting that there. And actually, we're not a million miles away. Not we're at ground zero and we can't do anything. So we set about a growth plan, which we're still on with. You know, now we need to see where the next ceiling comes. To essentially, we didn't quite double it, but 40% increase the business. What can we do to increase the business commercially? Obviously, is a huge area. Ticketing, huge area. But all the areas, every single department, review them all. We had wonderful people at the club when I took over who really cared about their club, and they needed help. You know, we were under-resourced, and I wanted to add talent. So we did. We added lots of talent, and the talent has helped other people. Going back to the promotion day one last time, there's lots of photos from that day that mean a lot to different people. The one that counts for me is a photo that one of our photographers took from the back, the top of the main stand, looking down onto the pitch. You have all the players and staff celebrating behind the billboards or whatever they call them, and all our staff, every single person, apart from maybe the ground safety officer who was a little bit busy at the time, all on the pitch with their families and all the players' families. That, in a picture, is years of work from everybody. And I'm blessed because we've got super talented people who care.
So it's amazing to hear that, because you've got to have the foundations behind the scenes. We talk about it again all the time to be able to give the performance side the best chance of success, particularly in the lower leagues where, again, quite a few of the guests previously have said it's literally almost directly comparable, the budget that you have and the position that you'll finish. You know,
it's not
give or take a few. But when you had that situation at Bradford a few years ago, have you looked at that and figured out why that kind of thing happens? Are you learning from past situations to ensure that this doesn't happen again?
Well, yes, I was there. I just wasn't in this role. So I had the benefit of watching it, if that, in the strangest possible way. I say benefit now, but at the time it didn't feel like that. It wasn't a nice place to be. You know, when I came to the club, I came from rugby league, and I came from a championship rugby league club, and I wasn't welcome, in my opinion, at Bradford. I wasn't made to feel welcome, and I was okay with that. I kind of expected it, you know, and that's something I thought if I ever had an opportunity to change, that's the first thing I'd change. How people are welcomed in and what let them express themselves a little. And like I say, it was unnecessary what happened on the pitch, but it wasn't a surprise when you got a feel of what was happening off it. Wasn't a nice environment. Everyone meant well. It just there was no direction. I never sensed where we were going. And frankly, at the time, I kind of thought I'd made a mistake. You know, I was like, I expected to find a well-oiled machine because I probably just looked at it naively. I didn't find that. So and I don't think you're ever a well-oiled machine, but you building towards being one, if you like. And yeah, so that was a shock. And yes, I could 100% see what had gone on. In my view, we had a requirement to improve all the areas discussed. If I'm honest, the off-field operation had to completely change and transform itself and become really like aggressively competitive. About we want to be the highest commercial revenue club in the league, etc. Them kind of conversations, which we're achieving, and probably the football side of the business was okay. There was a lot of changes made around the football part of the business before my time, and they played out pretty negatively, as you can imagine. And I think our footballing culture that we have now, and the way we're set up, and we recruit properly, and we have people that are looking at it in detail, and we use as much technology as we can, and we use our eyes, and we use people, and we trust people, and we have good people at the club. That had all gone. When Phil Parkinson had left and his staff had left, it was not a lot left behind it. And then it's tough for anyone who comes in. It's really difficult for them, and you need time. And the club chopped and changed its managerial setup, as you can. Lots of clubs do. It's not new. And the last two managers I've had at Bradford have both, I think, are now positioned. The current manager Graham is positioned third longest serving behind Phil Parkinson, and Mark Hughes is joint second with Stuart McCall. So we're going back towards some stability, which helps as well.
You were the youngest chief exec in the Football League, am I right?
Yeah.
When you took that role. That comes with its pressures.
Yeah.
Scrutiny of experience, right? The challenges you have to overcome. How do you deal with that from, an ability to execute your job and deliver what you're able to, but also deal with the hardest part of running any football club, which is creating a relationship with the fans?
Honestly speaking, I would say I didn't know how to deal with it, if I'm being brutally honest, because how would I? There is no user manual. No one told me what I was going to expect. The previous owner had acted as chief executive interim and put me into the role. And he purposely, we laugh about it now, I wasn't laughing at the time, he purposely allowed me to make mistakes because he knew I needed to. What is the point in preventing it? And I kind of carry that with our staff. Let people make errors within reason, because it's better for us going forward that they've made the error and they learn from it. Me the same. I'm sure we're all the same. That was human instinct. So I think it was very difficult at the start, but it went very well on the pitch. And that made it even more difficult as we moved further down the story, because I made a change to the manager very early, and I put a young coach in charge, interim, and we went on a run that has only been bettered this season, actually, in terms of wins in a row in the league. But that possibly didn't help, because then you believe that it might have come too easy that moment. So then when it went away from me for the first time, that was when I was probably at my most vulnerable, if I'm honest, in terms of where's the experience, where am I pulling the experience from to deal with this? And, you can imagine when I was appointed, it wasn't unilaterally popular, to say the least. But that's how it goes.
Critique being experience.
Just out of my depth, too young, cheap. Words that you remember because people said them.
Does that light a fire, though?
What's that?
Does that light a fire?
Yeah. I wasn't short of, it didn't deter me, but it took me back. When you work in other roles in football, in all clubs, you have a choice in a sports club. And I always wanted to run a club by 30. That was my ambition, but I didn't think it was possible, if I'm honest. But I didn't want to, damage anyone to get there or anything like that. I just wanted to be myself. And if someone gave me a shot, they gave me a shot. And if not, I would do the job I'm in to the best of my ability. And I got given the opportunity. And at that point, so then you've achieved something you kind of wanted to achieve. And then it felt very different the second it was announced, because it wasn't in the eyes, it's not sexy maybe, or it wasn't the best appointment Bradford could make in their opinion. And I knew that was coming, but I had no idea how to deal with that. How would you? Because I've just been in the shadows, so to speak, in every role. A lot of the roles in a club, and our staff would say this, is they know they're not going to be publicly questioned for a decision. And sometimes we have to talk about, if we make decisions inside the club, there's an acceptance that can come back to, will end up on my desk. So we just make sure we're happy with them before that happens. It wasn't my decision to put me in the job. I wanted the job and I believed I could do it. And it took me some time to probably learn every element of the role. I was on the job, but we were second bottom of the Football League. So we were going, in, for all intents and purposes, I think there was a belief potentially that we were being relegated. And I was willing to be the front man for that because I was never going to let it happen.
You talked about building a great business behind it and the importance of that. How involved do you get or have you got in the past with the performance side?
My view on that is fairly straightforward. I think if you're chief executive of a football club, then you have to be involved. To a degree, you have to be involved in the football team. It would be bizarre not to be. When we were without revenue, if you like, I had to wear many hats. Commercially, probably de facto director of football or whatever the title is now. And in more recent times, I've been able to bring in head of recruitment, bring in a head of football to work and help take the strain, and just like you had have a head of commercial or a head of retail, it's just the same. It's just the departmental roles. But I've always been involved in the appointment of the managers. I've appointed every manager at the club. I've also parted company with them all. I think that if you're going to lead, you've got to lead properly. So I would never do anything. I would never ask anyone to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. So that I think it would make very little. I mean, if you compare that to any other industry, if you were, I don't know, chief executive of Cadbury's, would you have no interest in the chocolate? It's the same drill, right? So you have to, and every club's different, and they're entitled to their views. I think if you become chief executive of a club and the football is on the other side, I don't know how you build a culture. How do you build a culture? How do you build people talk about one club. When clubs talk about one club, it's because they don't have it and they want it. And to have one club, then you have to have everybody together.
When you've gone through hiring managers, how difficult is that? When you've got a list of people, you've got great names on there who have achieved amazing things, let's say a Mark Hughes, for example. You then got emerging candidates who you may not have known, but you think are fantastic in a different way that people won't be as excited about, but could well get behind. How do you approach that whole process?
Yeah, it's difficult because they're all different times as well. So, and for different reasons. When I made my first appointment of Derek Adams, he'd just won his second or third promotion with Morecambe with a League Two club, and at the time that was a headhunt, if you like. We went and we purchased Derek Adams from Morecambe, and I felt at the time the club needed to be bold and be brave, and I wanted to show our supporters that we want to come back from this 3 years of decline, which almost took us out of the Football League for the first time in our history. And we boldly moved for Derek Adams, and we probably didn't give him the tools. If I'm being honest, he didn't have a squad. And then his expectations were probably set too high from the start. And then when we made our next appointment, that was a coming together of stars aligning, if I'm honest. It was a right time, right moment. We'd only just made our decision on Derek to leave the club. And then on this occasion, when we appointed Graham, which if you like was my third appointment as a outside of the club, that was the first time I ran what I would say a proper process. 4 weeks, 12 names, number of names down to 12, and that is incredibly difficult because at the time the club was. We weren't in a good place on the pitch. I think we were very low in the table. I had made a decision to put one of our players in temporary charge, which was which actually worked out quite well, but it wasn't received internally. That was probably a surprise to some of other coaches who may have thought they would get a chance. I didn't think that was the right thing to do. Kevin McDonald was the player. He's at Exeter now, and he gave me. I just asked him to give me time. I just said, I just need time. And we went through an extensive process. And then at some point in the process, and there's many details in it, there comes a moment where your gut tells you you've found the right people and you have to make the decision. And I knew that was a decision that I needed to get right because, after Mark left the club and we didn't get promoted and we lost the playoff semi-finals, it felt like we'd missed our chance. Some of our staff left the club after that after that semi-final defeat, they felt, probably them too felt it. And that's when you have to be your bravest, because that's when, when you slip in potentially back, and we dropped a few season tickets. We started to just have a dip in turn of, we're talking a couple of 100,000, not millions, but it dipped away from growth for the first time on my watch. That was the biggest test. And then it's easy to say, Graham's been a great appointment for Bradford. He's League Two Manager of the Year. He's done an incredible job, and we have a fantastic relationship, and we have a good bond. And through the good times and the bad times, it's not been, you stick together then, So it was obviously the right appointment, but that was the longest time I've ever spent making one.
And so now, your pressures on performance go up because you're going into a league. You've already highlighted, you get some. I mean, I was looking at the league table this year, and some of the teams in there, they're huge.
It's going to be fantastic.
Footballing institutions, right? League One is an amazing league. How do you prepare to compete? What now in your process? Let's use it right now. We're in the end of May. You've got a couple of months, but you've got to make some big decisions. How do you even go about approaching that?
Well, I think, first of all, you trust everybody. I trust my people. So we have had conversations about this for a long time. As a business, we're set up. We're fine for League One. We won't be making mass hires off the pitch. We want to make a few tweaks. But from a football perspective, it's obviously we've got a number of players out of contract, and we've got a number of players who've gone back to their parent clubs, and we've got some holes in the squad, and we need to bring some more quality. And the players that are still here would want that, because they want to have a squad that we can compete with. So there's a lot of work. And it's very important that we try to limit and make the right decisions as best we can. You're not going to get everything right, so you have to commit to that as well. And
I'm guessing you had a League One and a League Two budget.
Yeah.
So you prepared basically two scenarios. Your
Correct.
League One budget changes most by the amount of money you'll be able to commit to the performance side?
Yeah, I mean, our League One budget is, like I say, they're not dissimilar in the sense that whatever our break-even budget would be would probably keep us up in each league. But the opportunity in League One, we think, is there, but obviously in League Two, the gap, if you like, from the bottom to the top isn't 10, 20 million. It's 1 or 2. So you can clear that gap and put yourself in the right place. I mean, I was looking at a document this morning that I think in League One, 58% of the top 7 spenders over the last 6 seasons finish in the top 7. But that also means there's quite a chunk of people that buck the trend that way or that way. So we don't know what a top 7 budget looks like in League One yet, but we have an idea. In League Two, we knew exactly over the last few years what it looked like, and we have. That's the initial difference. You are going to have to spend. I mean, our budget next season will probably be echoes of the past. In terms of Championship, Premier League days, when we're talking about revenue, I mean, commercially, the club will probably do. I think we can do 2 million commercially, and I don't think that figure's been achieved in the Premier League by Bradford. So that is, yes, it's different money. With inflation, things have changed, but the numbers are the numbers at the end of the day, and they are massive compared to what they were. The business is a completely different animal. I think we need to look at our objective initially is to hit 12 million for turnover next season. My FD would tell me we should be more less optimistic and hit 11, but that's not the way we run the business. We will strive for that, and I think if we can do that, the growth of the business speaks for itself.
How much is your guaranteed revenue, let's say, improved on that line? So you go, now you're in League One, our piece of the media pie increase, so we know we're going to get like X amount more. How much does that influence that like 12 million number, and then what you have to achieve on top
quite
of
a bit of it. It's well over £1 million more. We've got the TV deal. When we voted for the TV deal, we were probably the only club in the EFL that it didn't suit, because it was an extra 200k plus, but we had $250,000 coming in from iFollow, from streaming, and you give that up. So we were double impacted in my view. We gave up our $250,000, which is now like 30, 40k overseas. But 2, our rivals that perhaps didn't have the $250,000 in this first place, then they have even more of a positive swing against you financially. So we actually voted for that deal, which was completely ridiculous on paper because we're voting to take less revenue. But I voted on behalf of the club as a league, not a League Two chief executive of Bradford. I think how could I possibly vote with eyeballs of League Two and then say, well, I want us to be in League One in the Championship because we'd be one club voting against, and it also is not the way we run because for me I'm a huge supporter of the Football League. I think it's the best governing body in world sport. I think it's run by the best people with Trevor and his team and Rick. I think they are exemplary at what they do. They need the support of the clubs, and we're honest with them. If we don't like something, we tell them. But they're very, 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 very supportive to the clubs. And I think, having worked in other sports, and you see the divide between the clubs and the governing bodies is just not there in football. It's just not there. There's a unity that supporters and partners perhaps don't see between clubs and the governing body. It makes you more powerful and you can move quicker. And the fact that they have people in their organisation that have worked in clubs, so they know how it goes. They know what you're up against, or they know the pros and the cons. Helps. So yeah, in terms of the revenue, yes, centrally it helps. And the EFL are developing commercially. They're developing all the time. There's more, like another 200k centrally is coming to us that wasn't there last season, from League One to League One. Let alone what we've gone from League Two to League One. So that's not a given. They've earned that money for the clubs. Obviously, we want more, but we're not a club that looks for that. We're not a handout club. We don't sit there and wait for people for more money to come down the chain, because I think that would change our culture. And we also, in terms of what our owner is investing, it is relative to what keeps us viable, because people talk about sustainability and what they really mean is sustainable losses. Yeah. What I try to talk more about, so I don't sound like I'm reinventing history, is viability. So where would the business sit if the owner was unable to help or assist the company? Could the football club turn its wheel? The answer is yes. So once you've achieved that, you're actually quite a bit further on than some of your other clubs.
It's one of the biggest issues. We spoke to Rick's been on the show and was fantastic. The most incredible recollection of statistics and everything without any information in front of him that I've ever seen. Amazing. But there were two things actually that we spoke about, and I was going to ask about both of them. But now you've mentioned that piece. One of them was the reliance on owner financing and being able to create sustainable businesses dependent on the performance of the club, not the depth of the pockets of the owner. Massive challenge, we all know. But also part of the reason for that is the challenge that you have now managing a market inflation. You give more money to a football league. You give more money to anyone in football, let's be honest. It happens in the Premier League, it happens everywhere. What it does is it just drives up prices. It doesn't necessarily encourage spend in other areas. It means that your player that last year cost 5 million may this year cost 7. It means that wage, which was $2,000 a week, is now $4,000 a week.
The increase in wages. I mean, I were looking at it at the end of the season, and we've not finished our financial year, but I've reflected on where we are, and from my start point, if you like, post COVID to now, we've probably spent in League Two 50% more on wages than we were at the start. The business is bigger, so the gap, but the gaps, we've had to make the gap bigger, if you like, to be more competitive, so that the loss gap has got bigger than I'd want it to. In the first couple of years, hundreds of thousands losses, now more towards 1 million. Next year, more towards 2, maybe more, and that's the price of promotion out of the division, if we're being honest. But you have to get that commitment at the start, which I've had. The challenge, I think, I'm a huge fan of what Wrexham and Birmingham have done for the growth of the game. I think we're not an insecure club, so we don't look at them and go, oh well, there's no envy culture, for us. We're like, they're making the EFL bigger. But of course, it has an effect on the market. When you see a centre forward go to a club like that for millions and pay them tens of thousands a week, allegedly, but that's the case. Yeah. Then that's definitely going to drive the price up of other players. You've got to be, and I guess for us, we just need to make sure that we spend our money wisely and we work very hard medically, and we make sure that we're happy with the players we're bringing in, and then we're happy to commit to them, and we won't spend what we haven't got, as in what we haven't got plus what our owners willing to help support with. based on a set of objectives. So we won't go beyond that because I wouldn't want to risk the viability of the business further down the line.
So Stefan Rupp, your owner,
Yeah.
do you sit down with him at the beginning of that season, looking at those finances and going, right, this is where there's likely to be a commitment on you individually on top of obviously the turnover of the business, and this is where we may require a little bit more investment if you're keen for it to take us here instead of here?
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much like that. We speak regularly, as you can imagine, daily. But when it comes to that kind of thing, it's towards the end of a financial year, somewhere usually between almost the end and the very end. But this year it ended in the way it did, and there was going to be a week where we just needed to put the ball down and maybe pick the champagne up kind of thing, and we did that certainly. And I think I take the figures, the projections with our FD. We'll sit in Munich. We have time together. And for me, it's fun. Part of my role is to sell, not to sell the position, but to essentially give my opinion on what will the outcome be. And this season was the first season where Stefan had to truly invest significant funds for us to maintain the budget that we'd been able to generate in many other ways in the past by having more cash reserves or bringing forward sponsorship revenue, which we'd done in the past to make a fist of it. And we've delivered promotion at the first attempt on that. That then doesn't mean that's a license to do it every year. And then the conversation is, if we set this budget, that is the requirement. If we close the gap, which I think we will, as in I think our turnover will be better than the projection, what do you want me to do with that money? Do you want me to reduce your input, or do you want me to add it? And that's fluid. That's a fluid conversation because that will be dictated to as the season progresses. January, for example. In my time at the club, he's never taken a penny back, ever. In my time in charge, he hasn't had to put much in, if I'm honest, relative to comparatively to some of the clubs that I don't need to mention. You can work them out yourself in League One and League Two and the Championship and beyond. But in League One, there are some owners putting in 10 million plus, maybe more, maybe 20. 15 to 20, and that's not an exaggeration. Those numbers would never and are not part of our game plan ever. But we still want to mix it with those clubs, and we think we can. Whether we can beat them, we'll find out. But we want to be competitive. We're a proud football club. We're a proud city, and we want to give the support as a team, like they have been, that they start to relate to. When I first started at the club, right back then, when we got relegated, the supporters didn't want the players. There was no relationship. And now these people are, over the last few years, particularly, they're household names to the supporters. And that's massive. That's a real turning point.
How do you look at the current distribution of finances throughout the pyramid? We talk about it all the time, right? Centralised is a Premier League, gaps between Football League. You still have then incredible things where you have Jay Stansfield at 15 million being more than the turnover of the majority of clubs in there. So you've got huge money down the league, but then there's not enough coming from the top. We've got, for the second time, the 3 promoted clubs getting relegated from the Premier League. There's challenges everywhere throughout this, and money generally sits at the heart of it. How do you view the distribution of that money within the pyramid?
Well, when I first took this role, I was part of the COVID, if you like, Zoom meetings between CEOs and chair people for the first time. And the whole backdrop of that was salary caps, if you remember. They wanted salary caps in League Two, League One and whatever. And I, at the time, felt it was illegal to have a salary cap. It's a restriction, in my opinion, put upon a market that you can't place. And there were clubs in League Two that wanted a £1.2 million salary cap. Several. Despite what our model was in terms of can we break even every year, and we tried to, that to me just felt like a complete. How were you ever going to attract investment into the game? I actually use the word investment lightly, but I think the investment's real as well. But how are you ever going to? What is the future of that? I came from a sport where they salary capped the game, and I said it as a really young guy, before I was even thinking about working in a role like this, that I felt salary cap in Super League was the start of the end for Super League. And Super League as a competition is completely not the machine it was before the days of the cap. Now, there have been changes to that salary cap, and moved it around and added rules, but it's too late. They've set the dial for a limit on spend. And if you look at the salary cap for rugby league in Australia, it's complete. It's on another continent, literally, financially. So I think for football, the salary cap went in. The rules were ridiculous. It was about, if you sign a player before this date, it doesn't count. So then I remember Bolton Wanderers and ourselves just trying to do as many deals as we could. It was ridiculous. And they threw the cap out in January because I think the PFA essentially took everybody on and won. And I just thought, what a complete waste of time. However, going back to your point, if more money comes into the game, how are we going to control that? Because without some restrictions or some controls, or what you're going to do with the money, where do we think the money's going to go? It's going to go on the pitch. If you think about what I've discussed with you about the basics of our finances, if I said to you we're going to get another $1 million, I believe our owner's ambition is an ambitious guy, as am I, and we'd go, well, let's use that as well. We wouldn't go, let's put it in the bank, unless someone told us we had to, or use it to develop a stadium or a training ground, which would be useful, but you would have to be told to do that. So I completely respect the fact we need that the distribution is a problem. You saw some of the parachute payments as well that are coming down the chain. One of them clubs is in our league next season, and their parachute payment is unbelievable.
Luton.
Yeah. We're going to be up against it with them because I'm sure they'll use some of their money for their stadium and other things, but it would be a nice start point, to say the least. It's probably 10 times our start point, isn't it? So, but that's not us being envious of that. That's just the reality. It's the way it is. We don't spend a lot of time at our football club thinking about, wouldn't it be nice if we had another couple of million quid, because I think that can just affect your focus. We've just got to carry on doing what we're doing. We will support that. We always support the bigger picture with the Football League. We'll get behind what they're asking us to do, and if a deal can be done, which would, with the regulator, the new man strikes me as a man that wants to do deals that can improve English football and its viability longer term, then fantastic. But yes, I think the initial concern is bridging the gap between the Championship and the Premier League, of which, of course, we one day would like to be a part of. But, of course, going down the chain, that will help League 1, League 2, and it might even help the National League, and the future of that could be something different. But, it is. There's many conversations going about it. Everyone's got their own opinion, and we just try to crack on, and we'll see what happens with it. We have had good relationships with Premier League clubs. We sell a lot of academy players to Premier League clubs, and we respect them for what they do. We don't want to criticise the Premier League. It's an incredible machine for the economy of the United Kingdom. The amount of tax that gets paid into systems by these clubs, players, etc., is huge. It's massive for the economy. But it's about perhaps how can we all work a bit more closely. So there's you look at the amount of players that come through the EFL and end up in the English national team or other national teams, and it's massive. So I think there has to be a little bit for that and reflecting the growth of the game.
I wanted to ask you about academies and the influence of that on your business. We mentioned glibly earlier the football lottery, but when we talk about that, it's the revenue that you can't necessarily guarantee on your books that could come from a cup run. It could come from selling a player or an academy player or whatever that may be. How influential is your academy to the club and also to the business of the club?
Very, yeah. I mean, there have been seasons when I've been here where we've done nearly $1 million in academy sales in 3 or 4 players in one season, and there's some seasons where nothing. It's just it depends on. But we have a really good academy. There's a conveyor belt. Our former head of academy actually sadly passed away, which really created a huge challenge for us, because but we're lucky that one of his kind of project protégés, if you like, was still in the business, and we've given him a chance. And he's a young guy. He's in his early to mid-20s, so it's similar to myself. Why wouldn't you give the guy an opportunity? He's young doesn't mean he hasn't got the potential, and now he's in the process of, if you like, rebuilding that. But one thing we've not had to rebuild, we've invested heavily in the recruitment of young players. We brought a gentleman back to work with us who'd been elsewhere, and we reset our recruitment strategy lower, 8, 9, 10 years old, so we're not losing players to the other clubs. And for us, it is a huge revenue stream, because if you, as you say, you call it
Football lottery.
Yeah, I call it the football. Yeah, it's the football fortune, isn't it? And where I talked there about aiming for 12 million turnover, we might come up short. If everything went in your favour, you could be 15. If you had cup runs, selling young players, selling senior players, player trading in general. But for us in League Two, as a Category 3 academy, player trading is actually pretty important.
How many players do you? How many players do you look to put through the team? Just as right now, let's say from what you have now from that academy, is it supplying the first team?
No, if I'm being honest, because we don't have the resources we don't run an under 23 side, so we run an under 19s team. So we have to accept that we are potentially not providing the pathway that we need to, or the time that we need to. And there have been players, and there is one in our squad now, Bobby Poynton, who's bridged the gap on a level that is unbelievable. You know, he's a hero in Bradford, and he's come from our academy, and he made it from the 19s to the first team, and he plays most games. You know, he was on the pitch for the last game, and it's an incredible story, but we don't have the pathway. We could have the pathway, but we were taking it away from the budget that we talk about, which is already going to be stretched to compete in League One. So it's a tough decision we make, and that's why we centre our academy focus on the player trading, and then the players that we don't trade, we do bring them in. We do have 3 or 4 professionals that come into the first team squad every year, and everybody gets an equal shot. And some have made it, some have played some games, some haven't.
How influential is the loan market for you at this time? Bring those players in, from top teams looking for that opportunity, but also balancing that with the stability and the experience that you still need to have on a permanent basis.
I think it's critical for us. What we are able to sell to the Premier League and the Championship and previously League One clubs was the opportunity to play in front of huge crowds, for their young players to feel pressure that they can't replicate in under 23s football. And I would say the vast majority of our loan players have been some of our most popular players. And, it's so lazy to say that a loan player won't be committed to your club. I've seen, over the last few years, loan players cry on the pitch where attached players haven't. Not that that counts for anything, but they may be more emotional than someone else. But the loan players have been really special, and they've left their own legacies. Some of the names in our arena will go on. And for us to be able to now attract players from slightly higher, and of course the Championship, and potentially abroad, is really exciting, because we're still able to provide this unique platform that maybe only a few clubs in League One can provide. In League Two, we were the only club. The only difficulty at times was perhaps not the most attractive proposition for certain personnel to want to come and play in League Two. It's a bit different in League One.
Something we talk about a lot, and it's really important to us on the other side of our business as well, having an investment company, is the education of players and the provision of access and support to individuals who may not have the education opportunities to kind of finish and create sustainability for themselves beyond their footballing career. And it's becoming more of an issue, or at least something that is being addressed a little bit more now. We see a lot more athletes investing. We see a lot more interest in them getting involved in areas outside of sport. Do you have any involvement with players on that front, on what they do alongside playing football for the club?
It's a blend, really. If you're talking about younger players, we spend time helping them if they're not going to carry on with us. We train at part of a private school, so we use the school's education tool, if you like, to help the players, and that we have put players through their A-levels in that school, and sometimes parents have taken their children to that school as well, which has been beneficial for various reasons, and obviously logistically. As the players get older, I find it really interesting that certain players will ask you questions about the business. And I noticed that for a number of seasons, you'll be having lunch or a coffee or whatever with a player, and they'll start asking you about why would we do that, and what would you do there, and what were your thoughts with that, and you're thinking this is a little bit more perhaps than just making conversation. They're obviously starting to think about life after maybe football, and certain players you can imagine not working maybe as coaching staff, but actually you can see they've got this you get a sense when you work with people of where they might be able to fit in. And when you look at like former players that are now like presenters and they're like naturally gifted, it's like just meant to be. It's just part of their next thing. And I have sensed that. And then if a player ever said, I would like to be, some of our injured players have been involved in the social media side of the club with the media staff.
Really?
It's not a bad thing. It's quite good it's quite good for their health, mentally for them. It's good. It keeps them busy. And there'll be some players that don't think like that, and they just want to concentrate on their careers, and whatever will be. But certainly certain players I've had conversations with and thought, you're starting to think. You're starting to think about what's next. And if they ever needed that, we would always help them. We would 100% provide something. Yeah.
What about opportunities for building a business, right? Building and developing on what you've already got. Something I looked at straight away, and just it stands out enormously is the incredible ground that you have. We talked about Valley Parade, 25,000 seats. Again, a very common thread is trying to create a football environment or infrastructure that's 365, right? More than just the match days that you have to take advantage of. What influence does Valley Parade play in your ability to drive better business for the club?
A great deal, but it's a challenge in itself. So we look at a number of things like concerts, which we've never had, boxing fights on a significant scale, which we've never had. They are things we're looking at, but they have to be viable, and we're not quite sure about the viability of them. So they're huge projects to piece together. If you're not sure, we're looking at that as a way of developing our revenue in a different way. We don't currently have that. We are investing in our facilities more. You're seeing that at a lot of clubs now, where you go to some of these stadiums and their bars and restaurants are literally like bars and restaurants, not the old clubhouse kind of bar idea with an old carpet and some beer pumps. It's different now. It feels different, and we know we need to get on board with that, because that will help us drive more revenue. But of course, it's quite a lot of it's not as simple as that. There is a lot of capital involved, pouring money into a facility, and it will take you a long time to get that back. It's not as simple as if we spend, I don't know, $250,000 on an area, we're going to get that back next season. It's not like that. And then you're into this decision making situation, and I have a list every year from my people that help that essentially tell me what we need to do to be legal. So what are big things at Valley Parade? Our stadium, at the facility, the safety of the stadium is top priority for me, and the bills are huge for that. It's an ongoing, growing problem as the stadium gets older, and our seats need to be replaced, and they are not what they used to be. They're double the price, and you're then making decisions between seats that generate us $4 to $5 million in revenue, or bars that might generate us a couple of $100,000 over 3 years. So it comes down to this list, and that's before we've even started talking about strikers.
Well, that was what I was going to ask. Do you have how much you have to wrestle with the penny away from the pitch?
That's a constant wrestle. That's a constant wrestle. We have a running joke in our club that that they'll say, "Look, we need to do this, Ryan. We want to do this." I'm like, "Great. What's the budget?" And zero. And but actually, it sounds like a bit of a joke, but it's actually not a bad way to start. If your budget's zero, you'd be amazed what you can achieve when you don't have anything to start with. And then when you're able to then spend money, you can create something really nice. And we have to work like that, because we've seen, and anyone who doubted it, we've done some really great marketing campaigns at the club, in my opinion. We've developed season ticket revenue beyond anything we've ever achieved in the past. And we've developed a commercial portfolio on the back of it that we've never had. But the best marketing campaign that I've ever seen took place in the 96th minute on May the 3rd, because you cannot buy that. And you then have to harness it. And but equally, you've got to create a facility for the people that's worth having. And that is a wrestle, because you want to put the product on the pitch as well, because you've seen the power of what the outcome of that was. It was beyond anything we could possibly imagine. So, but it's quite easy then to slip into the if we just spend money, we can compete. That's not a straight line.
Do you get much pushback if you're spending money away from the pitch and fans go, "I'd much rather have that new striker"?
I think it depends on the timing. I think if you're doing well on the pitch and you change the seats, great. if you were perhaps not doing well on the pitch and you started to change seats, and you're seeing it at other clubs. The investment that some of the owners have put into the stadiums and the facilities, absolutely phenomenal. You know, they deserve immense credit for it, because it's not necessarily coming back to them ever, but their on-field results have not followed, and then the question marks come on that. And I always, you know, wherever you do, you'll always have feedback. I call it feedback, and it's interest, really. People call it criticism. I'd much rather have criticism than no interest, because then you've not got anything worth talking about, really. And the criticism or the feedback, if you like, changes. So if we're talking about at our club, the brightness recently of the LED advertising boards, I think we must be doing all right on the pitch. If we're talking about the centre forward can't score and we can't keep it out the back of the net, the LED advertising boards become irrelevant. So it's always about the balance for me, and I just think that comes with the territory, though. But I was asked recently, when are you judged in your role? And I said Saturday and Tuesday. And they said, but you're not playing. I said, yeah, but that's when you're judged. You could be quite good at your job, but if we don't achieve anything on the pitch, that in the eyes of a lot of people, you've failed. You're a failure. And if you win on the pitch, you might not be as committed in your job, but you've had some fortune on the pitch that might be someone else's work or some other era, and you go down and you're very popular. And that's fine. But I don't do this job to be popular, because if I did it, I should probably try something else, right? But that's yeah. I think it's about the balance, to be honest, Charlie.
It's the final one before I throw some quick fire questions at you. But you said something at the beginning which resonated, and it was, you know, many difficult days, few really great days, but those great days are exceptional.
Yeah.
Based on what you've just gone through and based on some of the challenges you've described and building those relationships with the fans, how do you feel what's happened over the last month or so has, I guess, changed that relationship for you and given you some confidence to really go and build and develop now with a positive message and a positive experience behind you to give you the credit in the bank to deliver for them?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit like the league table itself. So it's the game. The game is based on maths and probability as a sport. You don't score many goals, so it's all, you know what I mean? It's hard to score, right? And if you let's look at League Two, forget League One for a moment. There's 4 teams that can get promoted and 2 teams that get relegated, and everybody in the middle, apart from the ones that are happy to be in a playoff semi-final or a final and lose, achieve essentially nothing. So the chances of winning are slim, and the chances of losing are really high. And I guess, yeah, the point I made earlier is if you can, I've been in charge of Bradford now for 4.5 years. That's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of days, thousands, if you like, over 1,000. You come into that, and we are in those days. It's hard to always remember the ones that were really great. You can remember the tough ones because you never let they shape you and make you better. But the good times are few and far between. But as I said to our staff at the end of last season when we finished 9th, and we were really gutted by that, we missed out on the playoffs by a point. We probably didn't deserve to be there, but the fact we were so close was agonising. In the year before, we lose a semi-final, and then we lost 2 EFL Trophy semi-finals, one this season, one last season. It just felt like a never-ending, almost club. And that's tough for people that are coming to the well day in, day out, and giving you and the people around you everything. And I said to them at the time, I know it's tough, but when it happens, there's going to be 24,000 people plus in the stadium who are going to feel something that they've never felt. But you guys feel it in a whole different way because you've done it. You've actually built the whole thing. In turn, you've created the magic for everybody else to enjoy. And I think we saw that. You know, at the end of the season, we had most of our staff were in tears. Do you know, me included? It was massively emotional because of all that toil, if you like, the graft and the hard work. And the tough times where you sit there and go, wow, where do we go from here? That is a question that you do ask yourself, if we're being honest. Most people would maybe not admit that, but it's true. And so I think they are few and far between, but when they come, they're very special. You have to enjoy them as well. So a lot of people have said that to me in the last few weeks. You must enjoy it because we're free. It's just around the corner before your next challenge, and that's true. But equally, you're very mindful of not over enjoying it because you don't want to just. That can't be it. Yeah. There has to be more than that.
But there must be. Look, I mean, let's be honest. We're all human. There's some there must be great personal achievement and validation in what's been created over the last few years now, which is fantastic. But I'd also imagine there's very little time to pat yourself on the back. You're always going again. You're always building towards that next thing. And this now is going to be the major thing for the club, right? You just want to make sure that you stay there, but that's the worst case scenario now. You stay there. You want to keep pushing forward. And that's what the fans will want.
We want to use it. In terms of patting on the back, that's long. We're not big on that. I think I don't think, and if you need that, I don't know, it can be lonely then if it goes the other way. I think if you need that, it's nice to have, isn't it? When someone says, "Oh, you've done a good job," it's nice. It makes a difference, but it's not essential. But we've got to use it because this is the bit we've been waiting for. We've been waiting to see what the next ceiling looks like for us off the pitch in terms of how much we can drive into the business and how it ends up on the grass. What is the end product? So we don't know really, but we're excited to see.
Let's do some quick fires, if you're right. Okay, and we'll wrap it up.
Let's go.
What's the toughest decision you've had to make as CEO?
Probably two answers to that. At times, having the bravery to carry on is really tough because you've got your livelihood on the line when it's been really difficult or you've asked yourself some questions. But the toughest decision, without a doubt, is when you part company with a first-team manager. I think that's really difficult. That's the one where you don't sleep.
What's the game you're most looking forward to next season?
Well, we haven't had a West Yorkshire derby as such for 18 years. We play Huddersfield Town home and away, so that's a game we can't wait for. But to be honest, every game's exciting in that division for us. There are so many clubs that we want to play, that we've been waiting to play. I want to see how many times we can sell our stadium out, which is a really exciting prospect when there's been times early in my time at the club, perhaps not in this role, where we could count people left in the ground with 20 minutes to go or 10 minutes to go and averaging crowds of 13,000, 12,000. What could we do? That's the exciting part, and there's nothing. We're not afraid of it. We're really excited about it.
Do you think that those 25,000, that's going to be pushed? How many season tickets, for example, do you have?
We're just under 16,000 at the moment,
really,
which is the highest we've ever done. And revenue-wise, that represents like 3.1 plus million at the moment, and still ticking away. And that gives us a great base. Without that, you don't have a club.
Yeah.
People, it's overcooked where your supporters are your lifeblood, and for us it's critical because it keeps the energy there. It keeps the energy there for our owner to go, wow, one of the best days of his life, so he wants more of it, and that's important. And I think it was probably one of the best days of all of our lives, to be fair. But I think I'd like to see. We'll see
what happened after the Fleetwood game.
Well, I can't really. I can't. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, we went down to the pitch, and me and my colleagues and our families joined us, and the owner was down there, and we was on the pitch when everyone else had left it. We went in the dressing room. Obviously, Graham spoke about really wrapped the season up in 30 seconds, and Graham can talk more than I can talk, so it was a hell of an achievement. And it was we just let go a little bit, just enjoy it. I remember, I think, and Graham's did something that he didn't have to do. I wanted him to hand the medals out to the players. He said, "No, I want you to do it," because I think it's the the end of quite a long chapter for you in this story. And he basically said, you've been through some stuff. Do that, and I did, and I thought that was massively selfless of him, and it's not something that I wanted to do. So that was a nice moment. And then, to be honest with you, I was just with my wife and my friends, and I was just on the halfway line, and I just stood there for a couple of minutes. Just, you've got thousands of people still in the ground, maybe 10,000 plus. I can't quite remember. And, I've stood on that pitch many times or walked around it many times when I've been having to do some thinking about tough decisions or whatever. And to stand on the pitch and see that, it was just surreal. It was like it being in a film. It felt like you were in a movie. Just one thing after another happened. We had a shield presented to us. Things happened, and unfortunately, I lost my voice, so I sounded like I was. I don't know what I sounded like. I wasn't great. Yeah.
What time did you get home?
Oh, not too bad. We ended up in a street in Bradford, which is really popular, with all the fans and everything, and the players, and it's just like something you've never seen before. As a young guy growing up in Bradford, I tell people this a lot. We were spoilt, really, as youngsters, because we saw bulls and bantams winning everything in their sports, relatively speaking. Premier League, Super League, World Club Challenges, promotions. So we were constantly in City Park at the end of nearly almost every year, almost twice a year, just watching trophies go up, parties. And I just kind of thought as a young guy, don't get me wrong, one, I thought, wow, needs to be my life. If I can't play, what can I do? So it was an inspiring thing. But then you just take it for granted. And when we had the parade into Bradford, and I've not seen, I didn't realise, you didn't know what to expect. And it was like going back to when you was 8, 9 years old, and you're thinking, oh my word, wow. Like that's what it was like. And then you realise how hard that is to get. And you realise how much work must have gone on back there to deliver that time in, time again. So you want as much of that as you can get.
We'll be watching next year, excited to see what happens. It's been so interesting, and thank you so much for coming in and talking about it. So topical as well. Such an amazing time for you, hopefully for all the fans as well. I'm sure they'll love hearing about all this. So thank you for coming in.
Cheers, thank you.